Hello, வணக்கம் என் உயிரினும் மேலான இனிய தமிழ் மக்களே எப்படி இருக்கீங்க? This is your host Venki with another episode of Southern Spice, the only Tamil program on AM and FM radio in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state region. We are on Radio Zindagi, 1310 AM in Parsippany, New Jersey, 96.7 FM in Edison, New Jersey, and 540 AM all across the three states, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And we're also streaming live on YouTube and Facebook on Southern Spice USA handles. So, in the series of interviews with high school achievers, or I want to say overachievers, from Gifted Gabber, today we have a very, very interesting personality, and I want you to know about this very fine young gentleman. So, the social media is full of stories that catch your eye. But how do you know which ones are real, right? Harshvardhan is on a mission to help Gen Z develop the skills to spot fake news, understand biases, and navigate the digital world with confidence. And the focus again is on Gen Z, the younger generation. So, without further ado, let's put our hands together and welcome Harshva to the show. Welcome, Harshva. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you today?
Good. So, Harshva, for all of you, is a high school student in Coppell, Texas, in the Dallas Fort Worth area. So, Harshva, go ahead and tell us about yourself and what you're most passionate about.
Hey, so yeah, as you mentioned, I'm Harshva. I'm a rising senior this year, so very much still a part of the high school experience, if you will. And I guess that is where I derive my passions from, right? What I see on my day-to-day life, what I understand from it, and it is from that I develop my identity. So I guess the way I see myself is as a connector, right? I see myself trying to bridge gaps between understanding, right? Where you communicate and connect to different ends of the spectrum. And you mentioned misinformation, so I will try diving straight into it. Especially in today's world, this connection is really important, right? Because misinformation often spreads really, really quickly. And in some cases, even faster than information itself, right? So it is because of that concern that I see myself trying to create spaces where people are actually encouraged. People are empowered, right? They feel empowered to think critically and ask deep questions, right? Because this is essential, not just in the context of high school, right? An informed population, an informed upcoming generation is essential because that's quite literally what democracy stands on, right? And I guess I'm also passionate about our society and democracy in that way, because the entire idea of democracy rests on this self-determination, self-rule, right? How can we as a generation govern ourselves when we're not informed properly, right? So that is where I find most of my inspiration from, trying to navigate this world while also growing up as a generation that can effectively understand ourselves. So I guess that's why I care deeply about this issue. It's not just a media problem, it's a societal one.
Nice. So, how did you really come across this issue within your community, right? And something must have triggered in you to feel inspired to do something about this whole misinformation and how it's being handled.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. As I told you before, the community is how we shape our identities and our passions. And as you will know very well, last year we had the presidential election. And along with that, we also had a bunch of local elections, state house, state senate, city council, etc., etc. And I worked as a campaign manager and as an intern for a few of these campaigns. And one of our chief responsibilities as a political campaign was to get information out there, to get information regarding when to vote, where to vote, how to vote, what IDs you need to bring, when the registration closes, etc., etc., because you come to understand that people sometimes get the wrong information, right? And this is in most cases not exactly ill-intentioned. People are simply mistaken, and they inform others uh, because of their own mistakes, right? They might have also been fed wrong information. So the victims themselves become the perpetuators, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. Especially in like the city Facebook groups, where these moms and dads, they chat with each other, and if someone asks someone, you might give them the wrong information by mistake, right?
Yeah, Facebook and
And
WhatsApp, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. And if you think about it, it's not an issue on a mass scale, right? It's probably not going to affect every single person, but to that person who couldn't vote because they were an hour late, to that person who couldn't register because they forgot an ID, well, their vote doesn't count anymore. And to me, that was actually a spark, right? It was like a moment of realization where you understood how powerful, how potent the ability to deliver proper information actually is.
Nice. So you yourself came across this kind of misinformation campaigns, and that's when it kind of shook you up and said, "Hey, I want to do something about it, and this is what I'm going to do about it." So, how did you go about it? How did you attack this issue?
Right. Obviously, to advocate for something, you need to understand it in and out. And that's what I did for a while. I looked up a bunch of academic papers. I understood phenomena like how first impressions are often longer lasting, and that makes misinformation harder to correct. Because when someone hears something for the very first time, they're more likely to defend it, right?
Hmm.
So it's things like these you learn through academic research. But more than that, I was hoping to look into the source itself, right? I spoke to many journalists, I interviewed many journalists, and I understood a lot from them. These conversations, they were not always focused on misinformation, but the root causes for them, if you will, right? We spoke about how local media is often overshadowed by national media. We saw how, in some cases, local media is often more accountable. It is often more accurate than national media because they're closer to issues. And
Hmm.
when you see local media closing up, it leads to a higher chance of misinformation being spread. So it is these subtle things like these that you don't exactly get from just reading. You get these from conversation with actual people. And I also spoke to our city, Kopel, Kopel's chief communication director, and I also got a lot of insights from her about how the city actually communicates with people,
Hmm.
right? And I guess misinformation can be tackled from that aspect as well, right? Because city communications often clarify a lot of things.
Okay. So so then you obviously took some key initiatives to combat this, right? After
Mhm.
speaking with the journalists and getting all the background and all the knowledge.
Mhm.
So what was the next step? How did you combat it?
Right. So yeah, I've always saw this rather interesting because evidently there are national organizations, right? There are organizations on the national scale who try to fact check many things, and one of the failures that I see built into this model is that it is essentially impersonal,
Hmm.
right? Um, this issue is interesting in that it actually encompasses all of us, right? We're all part of the issue and the solution at the same time. So I've always believed you need a human touch to it, right? You need some local connection. You're more likely to lend your ear to someone from your neighborhood than someone who's shouting from a microphone somewhere that you don't even know where,
Right.
right? So this is what that is what I focused on, right? I conducted a bunch of webinars for people both my age, educators, community members, and they were all mostly people from the neighborhoods around me, right? People who didn't exactly know me, but they knew the place that I was from, and they
Hmm.
could relate to that. And that sort of trust, that sort of bond, it actually helps convey the message easier. And I also started this Instagram page where I post daily challenges regarding how to identify misinformation. I put out a headline and ask them, is that misinformation or is that accurate? And after that, you get to see the justification of why you would guess misinformation and why that would be correct, how you can identify things like these. So I guess in a gist, that's a few of the things that I'm doing. On top of that, trying to actively contact city officials to raise awareness about this, to raise their ability to communicate with people. One of the interesting things I learned was that actually very few people are plugged into city communications. Only about a quarter of the population of the city actually follows the city's socials. So things like that is basically a gist of what I'm doing right now.
Interesting, very interesting. So, as a natural progression, what can the average Joe do to also do do what you're doing, like to combat this, these kind of concerns? And it also relates to different age groups. So, the way we consume information and how we disseminate information from our end, right, also leads to misinformation. So how do you how does an average Joe deal with this or handle
Right.
this?
Right. So as I mentioned before, this problem is unique in that we are also a part of it and the solution itself. So we all don't need to be tech pros, or we do not exactly need to be particularly qualified to do this, right? We can do this just by taking a moment, pausing before you share something, right? Those 5 seconds allow a little bit of introspection. You can think about, is this actually something I trust? Is it something that's just meant to be inflammatory? Are there any sources listed over there? It's just a 5 second pause, and you can discern a lot from just 5 seconds, right? And when you control yourself, right, you're possibly stopping an entire vector of this spread, right? When you spread it, 5 other people might spread it to five different people, and that's just exponential. But when you stop yourself from sharing something that might be false, well, you're effectively cutting it right there. So I guess that's your average. That's what a daily person can do. And other than that, as for demographic concerns, well, there's an essential difference in the way people consume information, right? Especially when it comes to age. And when I'm focused on Gen Z, we usually consume most of our news from social media, right? If we see an Instagram reel, then we're probably, oh, look, that's probably right.
What are the most popular social media outlets out there for Gen Z?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I will try to be not very political about this. But so obviously you have social media apps like TikTok, Instagram, etc., etc. But inside those, there are certain people, there are certain channels, there are certain
influencers,
sources, influences, yes, that people follow. And these influencers, this is something I covered in one of my interviews with a journalist who mentioned how much power these influencers have.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
They are a force that contributes this essential decentralization of this information. I mentioned to you before how it is often nationwide or large-scale companies that now overtake local media, and these influencers, they essentially act as a counterbalance to it. But what a disadvantage of that is that these influencers are also not held accountable, right? It's hard to hold people over a distant screen exactly accountable. And they don't exactly claim that accountability either. They spread what is sometimes fact, which also mix with their own views. And that might not entirely be ideal in a sphere of information, in a place of understanding where people see that as their primary source. So I guess that is what Gen Z is particularly facing. But if you want to talk about the older generation, well, they still use traditional media, right? So you can't employ the same strategy to everyone. There is no one size fits all when it comes to this age divide on how we actually consume information. And I see people trying to combat misinformation on the upper scale, right?
Mhm.
Of those nationwide corporations, people listening to traditional news. But I find a remarkable lack of those sources, those places in the places that my generation, consumed information. So I guess that's partly where I'm coming from, right?
Right.
That localized effect, that effect amongst my own age group.
Okay. But very well said. Actually, there are a couple of very interesting points that you made. One is the 5 second rule. I think every human being should employ that tactic, before hitting forward without even verifying the veracity of the news,
Mm-hmm.
the information, without thinking for a second what kind of damage it can do to anyone, mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Just blindly forwarding that is, I think, today the bane of the society, because people are just
It's
very
that culture
happy.
of hype, if you will, right?
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Perfect. Very well said, Harshva. I think it's beautiful to see someone like you of your age. You're just a rising senior in high school, and to go so deep and think through these kind of problems and then tackle them. So when recognizing this kind of information or misinformation, as you want to call it, there is something that drives you to have the need to correct it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you've thought through the process. In your head, the need to correct it is basically to protect the community from receiving false
Mm-hmm.
information, misinformation. Is there anything else aside of that?
Right. So I guess it is also driven by my worldview, right? For me, I want to develop this culture where information isn't something that you get. I want it to be something that people actually seek out, right?
Hmm.
I don't want someone learning about something because they scrolled on Instagram and they came up upon a post, right? I want it to be something that people actually read, maybe just the headlines of the day-to-day happenings, right? And I want people to actually try to figure out if that's what's actually happening. I want people to try dig a little deeper, to try stay connected with the happenings of the world beyond their boundaries. And that information will help them acutely understand what is exactly happening to society, right? What is
Fantastic.
happening in the world around them, and the need to correct these these misinformation. And I think I should give an important distinction. Misinformation and disinformation, they're common words that we throw around, but they have separate meanings and are very distinct. Misinformation is when we share something, but we don't exactly know that that isn't right. There is no ill intention to it. And that's what I was mentioning regarding election times and all those things in those city Facebook groups, WhatsApp chats. But disinformation, on the other hand, is intentionally spread to promote false information. So that is far more nefarious, if you will. And then what drives the need to combat it? Well, the desire to see a society that is good at recognizing it, right? The truth itself, to me, is a form of service. And if we allow these falsehoods to persist for a long time, then it
Mhm.
becomes particularly harder to correct them. And I guess that's my hopeful vision for where we see the world going.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Great work, Harshva. I wish you all the best to continue doing this beautiful work that you're doing, to take it forward, not just, do it just when you're in high
Mm-hmm.
school, but continue when you're in college
Yes.
and further in life, and make this your life's mission. I guess
Mm-hmm.
you'll be saving the world you'll be a Superman without the cape. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for doing what you're
Thank
doing.
you. Thank
God
you.
bless, and wish you
Mhm.
all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on Southern Spice today. It was a pleasure having you, and I hope to see you one more time soon. Good luck with your high school and your future. All right. Take care, Harshva. I'll see you
Mhm.
soon. Bye.